Hi, and welcome to Relationships and Astrology series on love and the planets. And this week we're talking about the astrological weather from March 27th down through April 2nd, 2017. I'm Armand Diaz in New York.
And I'm Margaret Gray in Dublin.
Margaret, this week it begins with a new moon. We have sign changes. We got some hot aspects. What do you think? What stands out for you?
You know, it's such a very busy week. I think for me, the first two things that stand out, even though they're towards the end of the week, are actually the sign changes. That Mercury is actually going from Aries, which is very fiery, very dynamic, very quick to express itself, into Taurus, which is a whole different style of communication. So I think if there's something important to be said in a relationship, it's probably a good idea to wait until towards the end of the week, because with Taurus, we tend to really choose our words a little more carefully, really think about it. It's also an incredibly creative Mercury. So just to mention that, for any creative work or any creative work a couple might be doing together or a family or whatever, it's a great thing to do. And the other thing is, of course, Venus going right back into Pisces. So for me, those are really the two key things. What do you think, Armand?
Those are the key things. We start the week with a new moon in Aries, which we'll do a separate recording about. But in general, it's the beginning of the lunar cycle. It's time to get going. I think we kind of get the cosmic green light in a lot of ways. And we have some charged aspects this week. We have Jupiter is square Pluto, and we're going to get the preview of that. Jupiter square Pluto on Thursday, and we get a preview of it on Tuesday. There's a lot of forward-moving energy, but it's very early in the lunar cycle, when maybe it's sort of like, when you're waking up and you need to stretch a little bit before you get moving. And so I think that we're on the one hand, sort of pulled forward and ready to get going. And on the other hand, it is early in the lunar cycle. And of course, Venus is still retrograde and is going to retrograde back into Pisces. And so in the area of relationship, we have to be careful that we don't sort of get moving too fast. And I think your advice about waiting until Mercury goes into Taurus for that serious talk and so on is a great idea, because, we could be a little impulsive. The energy this week might be a little bit more inclined to push us forward, and maybe a little more Taurian energy to sort of slow things down a bit is not the end of the world.
I think it will help us ground a little bit and to feel a little less scattered. And there's an interesting aspect that, comes along with the new moon as well, which, as you said, we'll talk about more in our other recording, which is Mars sextiling Neptune. So Mars is in Taurus at the moment. So it's quite a grounded, earthy, solid Mars that likes to do things a step at a time. And sextile this Neptune in Pisces, it can be, in a relationship, can be quite romantic. There can be an anchoring of love, an anchoring of fantasy, so that we kind of anchor ourselves a little bit. And again, a very creative combination. So that's kind of quite nice. Now, also, Venus in Aries is going to be quincunx the North Node in Virgo. So I think there's something about also maybe putting that sense of self-value to the service of others. So something about, early in the week, maybe thinking about how can we help other people, as well as kind of being within ourselves. Because a lot of that Aries energy, we talked in our last recording, is very much about me, but also now there's a bit more, we're going towards like, okay, I need to start with myself, but what can I do for the other person or the other people in my life and beyond?
And with that Jupiter-Pluto aspect in the skies, we may, at any rate, be thinking a little bit more about community, the larger world, and some of the things that are going on in the bigger picture, rather than focusing entirely on the personal side of things. So I think that that's a good point. And that, Venus in the quincunx to the nodes, it's great. It's great that you brought it up, because it's one of those things that we're not necessarily 100% aware of. The hard thing about a quincunx is that we're not necessarily aware of it. So it's good to know, okay, maybe it's not exactly all about me and mine right now. Maybe we need to think a little bit more in the big picture.
You mentioned the Jupiter square Pluto, and of course we're in that energy all week. And here we have Jupiter in Libra, which is air, which is very civilized and wanting to see the balance of everything. And then it's square Pluto in Capricorn, which is much more that kind of primal energy of wanting to transform and change. So I think there's something with this energy about really checking, and we mentioned this before, but I think it's more emphasized this week, checking, are the structures of our relationship real? Are they built, have we built on on quicksand or have we built on very solid foundations? Because that's, of course, crucial in terms of going forward.
Yeah, and where, that I keep using the word diplomat for Jupiter in Libra, and of course Pluto in Capricorn is not diplomatic, and we have to look at both sides of the story. Maybe power plays and things like that aren't the best all the time, but on the other hand, there can also be points where diplomacy fails. I think so that we need to recognize that both energies have a potentially positive side to them, and there's a potentially you know Pluto and Capricorn can sometimes just get real despite Jupiter's tendency to sort of, well, let's generate another possibility.
Yes, I think that sense of being real is very important. And then we come, of course, to the end of the week when Venus goes right back into Pisces. And she's going to be, she's going to be there for about 2 weeks, of course, until she then goes direct. She's still retrograde. And so we're back into that Pisces energy, which she was in, of course, early in February at this same point. And I think, we really shift into, from that fiery dynamic energy, which has been going retrograde and feeling a little frustrating, that in Pisces, I think the retrograde may not feel quite as frustrating because it's more of a gentler energy. But of course, we're back at looking at things like, romance. Is something romantic, or are we delusional? Is this a fantasy relationship, or is it a real relationship? Are we avoiding relationships through escapism, or, are we enjoying being in that kind of place of being a martyr? Because of course, there's that possibility as well. So a lot of those themes are really going on. And just to remind listeners that our webinar that was on last Sunday will be for sale on Venus retrograde, on Venus, actually, sorry, not Venus retrograde, it's Venus through all the signs of the zodiac. So in fact, but it is very relevant for this retrograde period in that it will help you with your own Venus and the Venus of your partner.
And this is actually, as we're getting to the end of the retrograde on April 15th, we're more than halfway through now with this. The Venus has conjuncted the Sun going retrograde, and we're kind of in that phase now. Maybe the excitement of getting a phone call from an old lover or something like that is probably past, and now we're really much more in that space of like trying to integrate and think about what we've learned and to work through the experiences. So this is a very good time to be sort of reflecting on relationship.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess on that note, we will say goodbye and talk to you again next week on the transits of next week. Bye-bye, Armand.
Take care, Margaret.